Appreciate the brilliance of William Cullen Bryant. As an added blemish, Auden was originally from Britain, and for his teacher, the Brits were too stuffy and self-absorbed. When Tony mentioned that Shakespeare was British, Mrs. Thompson made an exception because Shakespeare was almost God, as she put it. Very few classmates shared Tony's passion for poetry, let alone Auden. Their chatty moments during class and in the gossipy strolls in the hallways were shaped by the noisy praises and evaluations of the latest 1984 music. Tony watched the nervous, hormone-driven behavior of his classmates in English class, in the boring geography class. Their cruelty ignited in music class, particularly targeted at Mr. Crane, the music teacher, who made them listen to cast albums and sing along from West Side Story and South Pacific. Tony and Abigail Portman were the only two who enjoyed the class. It was in that same class that Tony first heard the word fairy targeted at Mr. Crane, whispered loudly by Danny Winslow as the teacher leaned over to change the vinyl record on the turntable. Mr. Crane reddened, but he pretended he didn't hear the word. He remained deaf in that manner as the word peppered the class throughout the school year. Tony noted the man's stiffened expression, his distant stare, the pleasure he finally achieved as the music filled the air and blanketed the whispers before they could rise and darkly cloud the room. Tony asked one evening, "Maggie, when you call someone a fairy, what does that mean?" Maggie reached into the oven with a gloved hand and removed the cookie sheet holding the fish sticks and fries. She lifted the spatula from the countertop and placed it on the cookie sheet, positioning the ensemble of seafood and potatoes in the middle of the table. "Be careful, it's hot." "Is it like in Shakespeare, the fairies?" "Now, why are you asking me this nonsense?" "Just some talk at school." "Somebody say something to you?" she asked, agitated. "Well, not to me, about my music teacher. I asked Mrs. Thompson, but she told me to ask you." "It's just not a nice word, Anthony. I want you to always use nice words, okay?" Tony, as a writer, began as he grows up and reaches adolescence, and that writing becomes a part of a personality that is constantly looking and questioning, finding few answers. So we jump forward through the next year, and we find that Maggie meets and marries a man named Jerry Spivak. And Jerry is a very religious man who belongs to a denomination called the Wayward Order. And Jerry's quite conservative, and so his presence in the home changes everything. And Tony and Maggie's relationship begins to crumble. This episode that I'm going to read to you occurs when Tony is playing sick from school one day, so he can stay home and be by himself and listen to his music. Tony pulled the chair over before the dresser's large mirror and studied his face for several minutes. He lifted the foundation kit and lightly brushed his cheeks and down to his jawline. He gave careful attention to his eyebrows and eyelashes with eyeliner, eyeshadow. He guided the lipstick, understanding that less was better for his full lips. He turned his head to the side, appreciating the slight Cleopatra turn of the eyeliner at the corner of his eyelid. He lifted a pair of earrings set with jade stones, their delicate green color complementing the colors in the dress. He placed one into his ear and marveled at how such a small, dangling connection of gold-covered metal and chiseled stone could make such a marked difference to his appearance. Even without a wig, he liked what he saw, an image closer to the one residing inside, the one that he could articulate with the ritual of makeup. Tony lifted the other earring and turned his head to put it in its place when his eyes fixed on Jerry's face. The intrusion in the mirror was startling, out of place within the illusion of the moment. Jerry's eyes, even across the distance of the room, darkened in disbelief. Jerry's mouth hung wide, a dark cavern, his breath held in check, his rigid body. Tony tilted his head, angling his eyes again to see the fury that possessed Jerry's face. Jerry exploded across the room, grabbing Tony's arm. He yanked him to his feet. "What?" he asked, shaking his head back and forth. "What kind of devil are you?" He raised his fist in a high arc and pounded it into the rouged face before him. After several blows, Jerry stepped back and looked at his bloodied fingers. His balance was lost for a second, and he staggered with the clumsy footing of a child rolling from a merry-go-round. He leaned forward at the waist, his hands finding his thighs to settle himself. In the whispered breaths crossing his lips, he repeated a quick Bible verse, a saving raft to cling to in the unsettling currents of rage. "You will not possess me, Satan," Jerry said as he stood tall. So in the aftermath of this event, Tony decides to leave home. And as he leaves home, in Riverside, he eventually finds his way into Garden Grove, where he meets Pockets. And they eventually make their way into Hollywood, where they meet Lena and many others. And so finally, I thought I would just read for you a poem that Tony wrote. Within this section of the novel, he writes about 14 poems. And this is one that he wrote for someone who was very close to him that he loses in the novel. And the poem reads this way. Everyone takes a space in this design, a small piece that's shaped and cut by a divine idea which sees the completed whole. For every jagged edge, a smooth ripple exists. For every elongated line, a few knotted twists, resulting in patterns that are brilliant and bold. Forever slipping, fitting, overlapping, the shifting seeks its own way of adapting. And if your name had been omitted from life's list, there would be no place more lonely than this. Thank you.